Rising from the heart of the Spanish peninsula, an ancient fortress guards 1,000 tales of grandeur, treachery, and madness. Behind its walls, weak kings cowered, warlords plotted, and one remarkable woman freed herself to create a new nation, seek out a new world, and unleash a scourge of inquisition. Join us as we explore the sumptuous halls and mysterious passages of the mighty Alcázar of Segovia, next on Great Castles of Europe. Long before there was a Spain, there was the ancient kingdom of Castile, the center of the Spanish peninsula. Many kings, many nations battled for Castile. Its climate is harsh, its rocky soil studded with many fortresses, but the strongest of fortresses, high and impregnable, is Alcázar, the fortress of Segovia. When was the Alcazar begun? We could say millions of years ago, when upheavals and floods cut out a natural fortress, a lofty, defendable perch with 300-foot walls. The Alcazar commands a strategic choke point where the Maresma and Clamores rivers meet, 70 miles north of Madrid. It keeps within its powerful walls 1,000 tales of betrayal, pomp, and suffering. Another story lingers here, how Spain became a nation. Ancient native tribes lived on this height, using the natural limestone caves against the weather. Roman legions, subduing the natives for the empire, made it a fortified garrison. They used the caves as storerooms, and not only carved out the tunnels and foundations that lie beneath it today, but supplied it with water from the mountains, using a remarkable aqueduct built in the 1st century AD. 128 arches, spanning almost 1,000 yards, 12 stories high. Its vital strategic position, controlling the rivers and the passes through the mountains, was worth the effort. By the 5th century, the weakened Roman Empire had retreated, and the high ground above the rivers was occupied by marauding tribes from northern and eastern Germany, the Visigoths. 200 years later, the peninsula had fallen under the sword of Islam. The Moors made Segovia's steep heights into a powerful fortress. They left behind masterpieces of Moorish decoration, patterned walls that display intricate, rhythmic geometry. It was a center of battle for 600 years, changing hands as the Moors were driven back to Africa. In the 11th century, the fortifications were expanded, and the royal apartments were made more comfortable for Alfonso VIII and his English queen, Eleanor. The Alcazar became the northern seat of the Castilian kings who traveled from castle to castle. It was the favorite capital of a remarkable scholar king named Alfonso the Wise, one of the brightest lights of the 13th century. A monarch of enormous intelligence, he was also a poet, musician, and astronomer. From this octagonal observatory, he mapped out the heavens, earning a reputation as a sorcerer. He was said to criticize the state of the heavens, claiming that he would have made them neater and more orderly. A monk warned him to repent of his blasphemous pride. Alfonso refused, until a lightning bolt killed his assistants. Alfonso's repentance is reflected in the decorations of the cord room, based on the humble cord belt of a monk's robe. The Iberian Peninsula that would become Spain was then a hodgepodge of little kingdoms and grasping lords. After Alfonso, Castile and its neighbors were caught up in a plague of civil wars. The Alcazar was a veteran of many sieges when Castile's King Enrique III died in 1406, leaving the Alcazar to his son, Juan II. Like Alfonso the Wise, Juan filled the Alcazar with music, painting, and sculpture. But he was no equal to the earlier scholar king. In the brutal arena of 15th century politics, where assassins and poisons were the common tools of statecraft, he was a misfit. But Juan had an alter ego, a darker side embodied in his advisor and childhood friend, Don Alvaro de Luna. Brilliant, courageous on the battlefield, a cunning strategist, Don Alvaro was the strength behind the throne. Over a long reign, Juan II and Don Alvaro made the Alcazar one of their most important castles, the virtual capital of Castile, even though no single castle was a permanent home to a king. Weeks before a king's visit, these sumptuous rooms would be laboriously prepared for his arrival. Sweet-smelling rushes and herbs would be strewn over the alabaster floors, scented linen spread on the mattresses, the grand halls and little apartments repaired and readied with as much care as the walls were readied for a siege, prepared for a friendly invasion of a king. Hundreds of traveling advisors, servants, relatives, a long baggage train of clothing, paintings, and furniture. For a month or a season, the king and his court lived high and hard. They dropped food and refuse on the floors. They ate, danced, worked, and slept in their heavy robes, bathing seldom, if at all. The smell of sweaty crowds and spoiled food and rich cooking and smoky fires were masked with pungent perfumes. In time, the king's retinue would move on to the next castle, leaving a dismal cleanup job for the Alcazar servants. The reign of Juan II had two faces. One was Juan's gala life of court dances and festivals. The other face belonged to Don Alvaro and the dark business of Castilian politics. The military authority belonged to Don Alvaro. He and Juan probably collaborated on the Tower of Juan II, built high to escape the rapidly improving artillery of the 15th century. There were, of course, some matters of state only Juan could carry out. His first wife died after providing him with an heir to the throne, Enrique. To broaden Castile's power base, Juan then married Isabel of Portugal. Isabel hated Don Alvaro, Juan's shrewd advisor, on sight. Over the subsequent years, she plotted against him. Finally, she persuaded Juan to sign a death warrant for his best and oldest friend. The great Lord Alvaro de Luna was taken to Valladolid and beheaded. Without Alvaro, Juan was lost. How could he rule the kingdom? Who would succeed him on the throne? His first son, Enrique, was a bitter disappointment, and he had little hope for the two infants Isabel had given him. In the year after the king had his friend executed, he sickened and died, declaring that his life had been a sad trial and that he would sooner have been born the son of a simple craftsman. Juan had been right about Enrique. As king, he was stupid and spineless. His libertine court life and his perverted excesses shocked all of Castile, even in a time when the shortcomings of a monarch were often overlooked. The single grand feature of Enrique's reign was the Alcazar itself. No other king loved it as Enrique did. No other passed so much time within its forbidding walls or expended so much money on its decoration. He had spent his youth and died the next morning. His sister Isabel seemed unshaken by this bit of fate or planning. Enrique, re-established in his beloved Alcazar, offered to forgive his half-sister. He offered her titles and gifts, but she politely refused, asking only one small favor, that she be named next in line for the throne. She proclaimed, of course, that her dear half-brother would live through a long and peaceful reign. Enrique arranged a grand show of reconciliation at Alcazar. He led Isabel, mounted on a white mule, through the streets of Segovia. After a state dinner, they dined together on sweetmeats. Enrique felt a burning pain in his side and was rushed to his bed. He lingered for a year, but never recovered. During that year, Isabel completed one of her boldest and most calculated moves. She chose her own husband, Ferdinand of Aragon. He was her first cousin. They could only marry with a papal dispensation, which they did, though the dispensation was an obvious forgery. King Enrique died in 1474. Isabel immediately mustered all the pomp and splendor that the Alcazar had to offer: the royal jewels, flags, processions, the glittering vestments of the church, and had herself crowned queen. By marrying Ferdinand, ruler of Aragon, she had united the two kingdoms of Castile and Aragon into the state that is now Spain. A woman of remarkable will, intelligence, and character, she determined they should rule as equals. Ferdinand acquiesced, wisely, considering the fate of others who stood in her way. Their motto, tanto monta, monta tanto, Isabel como Fernando, means equal importance, shared dignity, indivisible rule. Spain had become one nation, and the Alcazar was its seat. The fortress of Segovia witnessed the expanding wealth and influence of Spain's golden age under this Renaissance couple. The adventurer and entrepreneur Christopher Columbus bided his time in Alcazar's halls, waiting for an audience, an opportunity to convince Isabel and Ferdinand to finance his plans for a new trade route to the east. They ventured a small grant of ships and supplies. With this meager investment, they won a foothold in the New World and changed the course of history. The Alcazar also saw great suffering in Spain. The years of virtual imprisonment with her half-brother's wicked court had stored up in Isabel a pious rage. She began the Spanish Inquisition, a fanatic and ruthless crusade to enforce the Church's absolute power over the hearts, minds, and bodies of her subjects. Isabel and Ferdinand arranged the marriage of their daughter, Juana, to a Habsburg of Burgundy called Philip the Fair. With him, into the Spanish coffers should have fallen the rich plums of Flanders and the Netherlands. Queen Isabel had the will for rule. Juana did not. When handsome Philip left her, a virtual prisoner in the castle of Mota, to carry on with his armies and mistresses in the north, she began to lose her grip on sanity. He was an ambitious foreigner, and the Spanish have a long-standing hatred of foreign rule. When Isabel died, Philip seized the reins of Spain. He replaced the leaders of Spain with Flemish nobles of his own. He tried to have Juana declared insane to assume sole leadership of Spain. One city, one fortress held out, the Alcazar. Beatriz de Bobadilla, a friend to Queen Isabel since childhood, swore to defend the citadel the Queen had given to her and her husband, the Marqués de Moya. Philip marched toward Segovia, but he never arrived. The confinement at Mota had developed in Juana a fear of being shut up in castles. She balked at traveling directly to the Alcazar, and the royal procession detoured to a smaller town, where a festival was given. After a fast game of the basketball game pelota, Philip retired with a chill. Juana sat by his bed. Early in the morning, he felt a fierce pain in his side, vomited blood, and died within a week. Juana quickly lost touch with reality. For months, she traveled only at night, dressed in rags, with a miserable company of retainers and the poorly embalmed body of Philip. She occasionally opened the coffin to view the remains of the faithless Philip. She died 46 years after Philip, mad in a dark chamber. She remained queen till the end. Spain's next king, the son of Philip and Juana, was not only heir to Isabel's holdings in Spain and the New World. Charles V was from the royal Habsburg family, whose territory included much of continental Europe. But to the nobles of Segovia in 1521, Charles was an outsider. Charles held to his father's northern roots and replaced officials and nobles with Belgian lords. As Charles traveled abroad for a state conference, his carelessness caused a rebellion. To represent him in his absence, he appointed a Belgian regent. This insult was too much to bear. Segovia's nobles attacked. Forces loyal to Charles retreated to the Alcazar and withstood a 5-month siege. The town of Segovia was all but destroyed by artillery. The nearby cathedral was blasted. In fact, the walls of the Alcazar would never be breached. This secret exit from the royal apartments was never used for escape. It was never needed. It stands today as testimony to the stubborn strength at the heart of Spain's birth as a nation. Where thousands of tourists wander through magnificent, stately rooms. Yet they are closer here to the violent and flamboyant spirit of the early Renaissance than almost anywhere else in the world. A 3-day fire in 1862 consumed some of the glory lent to the fortress by Alfonso the Wise, Juan the Weak, Enrique the Impotent, Isabel and Ferdinand, Philip the Handsome, Charles V. But more than enough remains to make the Alcazar one of the great castles of the world. A walk through its staterooms is a journey through centuries of ceremony and intrigue. It's a look deep into the lives of rulers who helped create the contemporary face of Europe and the New World. Its countless halls and secret chambers still resonate with the history of the ages. Today, under the stewardship of Spain's General Military Archive, the Alcazar continues to dominate the high ground of Castile. It remains faithful to its purpose, forbidding without, lavish within, undaunted and unbroken after 2,000 years of glorious history.